welcome everyone. So hi, this is July 11th, Monday, July 11th. We're happy to be here with Duncan Martinez. Duncan is a graduate of the Cal State LA bachelor's degree in communication studies program that was started originally in Lancaster prison in 2017. He's currently out, and he's soon starting an MFA program at Cal State LA in television and film with the focus on writing. I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit later, just briefly introducing myself. So I'm Kamran Afary. I'm also a professor at Cal State LA. I've been teaching at the Lancaster program since 2017. I know that Duncan and I have had at least 5 courses together, I think, over the last few years, and worked on editing a journal together. And I helped also, the creation of adaptation of some of Duncan's work into animation documentaries and performances, and would like to come back to that later on. And maybe we can also edit some of those material into this interview later as well, too, so that people can see for themselves some of the great work that you've done. Elizabeth and Lynn, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Go ahead, Lynn.
Oh, sure. I'm Lynn Baker-Nauman. I'm a marriage and family therapist, registered drama therapist, and adjunct professor for the Rising Scholars Program at Folsom Lake College for Social Work Human Services. I did drama therapy inside, or drama therapy-esque theater inside prisons for about 7 years, and now just working on the social work aspect. And then currently putting together a program for reentry with ARC, with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. So I'm excited about that.
And I'm Elizabeth Malone-Altit, a registered drama therapist, and I also have my MFA in acting, and will be pursuing my MSW in social work soon as well. And I have been working in carceral settings for several years, doing drama therapy and teaching artist work, namely also with Kamran, Dr. Afary here, working at the Lancaster State Prison, where I met Duncan and got to see his, creative side. And so very happy to be interviewing him today.
And so Duncan, maybe you can just sort of start by just introducing yourself and talking a little bit about your performance, work, and experience background, and I'll try to also come in with some specifics later as well too, and ask you some questions.
Okay, Duncan Martinez. I spent 27 years inside, and the addition of things like drama therapy or drama at all really changes the complexion of what happens on a yard. Not just in that class, but overall. People in prison tend to wear masks, and there tends to be a prison norm. And when there's nothing outside of that norm, that's all you see. And when you have programs like drama, simple acting workshops, or things all the way to drama therapy, you see those tend to go away. It's options that people didn't otherwise have. And it's a side of it that I don't know if people realize as much from the outside, but instead of seeing the gruff, hello brother attitude that you see from basically everyone, you start to see guys be themselves in a much freer sense. It's really exciting. I'm really glad I got to work not just with Cal State LA, but with different groups doing that in general.
Wonderful. I know that when you were applying for graduate program, I got to see your CV, and it was amazing. You have 20 years of performance work, on multiple levels, working with different kind of workshops, drama workshops. I know you also were working with the art studio as well too. So can you talk, just let me go into detail about the variety of work that you've done in dramatic arts
Sure.
and performance?
Well, first off, there used to be Arts and Corrections inside, which was funded and brought a lot of programs in. And the first drama work I did inside was through Arts and Corrections, and um, Peter and Violetta were two working actors that taught it. And I was there when it first got to the yard, and I was there and got to see the change I talked about. Um, and it's really interesting watching people come out of having done Shakespeare in prison, and people on the yard wanting to quietly, what was that? What was that like? Did you guys have to do any crazy stuff in there? Is it fun? Um, but it just gave options. And back then, there were a lot of programs. They all got shut down for a while, and they've slowly been coming back. But because I was lucky enough to be in that first group, and because I was lucky enough to kind of have that access, it opened a lot of doors moving forward for me from an art perspective. Um, I learned to be a very different painter. I painted a little bit before prison. I learned to be a very different painter, a much better painter through our art programs. And I got to do a lot of acting. I wrote a play that we produced inside. We had a director from the streets come in. We had the same thing with old screenwriting program, which was really, really cool. The prison used to generate 200 screenplays a year through that program. And those things make a huge difference. Again, it's options. If all you have is dominoes and hello brother, that's all you've got. If you suddenly have the ability to go write something and have somebody read it, to express yourself in various ways, that opens doors. And maybe the biggest problem inside is that most people were failures socially coming in. That's why you go to prison. You don't go to prison because you were born a bad guy. You go to prison because you didn't fit in society. And that led to being an outcast. When you don't have any other options but other outcasts, you remain an outcast. You can revel in it. That's a lot of what gangs take advantage of. When you have other options, like I say, it suddenly starts to change everything. And it can be really subtle, or it can be really mind-blowing. I've told you, Kamran, this story before, but I was at day room once in one of our classes. We were doing Notes from Underground, which is not a simple book. And I went to day room one day where normally you would see guys playing pinochle or dominoes or things like that. And groups tend to do the same things over and over again. And there were 4 men, not in class, not in college, with copies of Notes from Underground, with a note sheet from one of the classes, discussing the novel. And I just went over and listened for a minute. And this was not a trivial discussion. These guys had really broken this book down and really embraced it because someone had given them the option. And I found out later that I think 3 of the 4 of them had cellies who were in the college program, and that's what started it. But that sort of kind of outward growth from opportunities changes, like I say, it changes everything. A lot of the effects on A Yard came from the art program. A Yard was a progressive programming facility, originally the Honor Yard. It was a very different kind of place. This was a level 4 for a long time where there was no violence at all, which doesn't happen in California prisons. Level 4 is the highest security level. And that type of mindset, that type of we can be different than this thing we're expected to be, that's an amazing gift. And we can talk about, going through trauma and all of the positive effects of that. But that's a smaller thing, maybe as important. But the bigger one is even the guys not in classes change when classes like that happen. And that's, to me, was the most amazing thing that I got to see as I went through it all. So for 20 years, I worked on a bunch of projects. I did everything from acting in plays to writing plays to painting, doing major art galleries or art shows with the painting. We had sculpture for a while. We had all sorts of different things. There was dance, which I missed out on. But all of these things really are just a cumulative opportunity. And it, like I say, it's really impressive.
I'm curious about before you were incarcerated, did you do theater, drama, writing? What was kind of your background in that, as a kid, as a young adult? And then was there, kind of what got you involved inside? Because, I hear different types of stories from people who
Sure.
are like, I would never do that, to, oh, I did it before. It was an easy, bridge for me. I was excited when it came. So just hearing a little bit about that for you.
Well, I did this sort of thing before. In fact, one of the things looking back in high school is they had a really good theater program at my high school, and I had to pick between theater and cross country. And cross country track was kind of my sanity in school, so it was a no-brainer at the time. But we had a really cool theater program, and I had a bunch of friends that were in it, and I really wish I could have done both. I've been an artist one way or another for a long time, especially a writer. In fact, my big epiphany in college, I was a college student when I was arrested, was figuring out that I was a film major. I was a bio major that realized he was really a film major. And I had just been awarded, I hadn't gotten it yet, but I just found out I was going to get a $20,000 grant to make a student film the next year, which, in 900 BC, when I was back in school, that was a lot of money. And ironically, they told me to write a screenplay, and I wrote a screenplay about two guys, one of which ends up going to prison. No idea that this was coming, but that was the script that I picked. And so I have this as kind of a background. I was raised with theater wasn't a career. Art was not a career. These were not things you could do. You can do that for fun on the side, but a real career is like being a biology major, which I absolutely hated. Very good at it, but I hated it. And when I realized that film was me, that was a huge wake-up call, and the thing that interestingly saved me inside. I literally went into an office, found out about the $20,000 grant, had just switched to being a film major, went home that night. I moved into a new apartment, went home that night, called mom. We talked on the phone for 3 hours, a ton of tears. First time in my life, I really felt like I knew what I wanted with my life. And I was arrested the next morning. Now, that's sad in one sense, right? I mean, I was derailed from this thing, but I had identity going in. I had a role that defined me. I knew who I was and how I perceived myself within that role. So when I got to jail and there was the choice of fitting in and being violent or not fitting in and not, it was really easy for me to pick the latter. It's really hard for most kids, and I was a kid, to pick the latter. It's not popular and it's not safe, or seemingly. But because I knew, because I had that grounding of, oh my God, I'm this guy, it made it much easier. And the peer pressure in those environments is really, really intense. And the same was true when I got to prison, which is very different than jail. And my decisions and what I did, I walked on the first yard I was on had a screenwriting program, which ironically, the first week I was supposed to go, one of the women from my high school theater project or the theater program was there. I missed her. Samantha Mathis, who has done some stuff. But it changed how I saw things, and it allowed me a very different perspective coming in. It meant a lot of the time, especially early, that I was an outcast in a world of outcasts because I didn't play the game. And it meant for a very different road in those senses. But because I knew who I was, it made all of those things very, very easy.
This is Duncan Martinez, and I'm going to start. I am 13 years older than my sister, which means I was old enough to understand that her coming meant more work for me and less attention and stuff. I would have to babysit and there would be fewer perks. I got that, and I was therefore not very excited for her birth. I wasn't against her, but I wasn't excited either. When she was born, I was taken to the hospital, but unable to go in because she was born prematurely, and that section of the hospital had age requirements. I didn't mind, but my uncle did, and he dragged me there to see her through a window. What's the hurry, right? But when our eyes locked for the first time, something in me changed forever. I went from antipathy to extreme love. The emotional shift was the greatest I have ever felt. Understand that I went from a rational place of understanding. I would have to be the babysitter, do more chores, and get essentially nothing out of it. I went from that to a bond that was so deep I would have done anything for her immediately. Whenever I would pick her up, she would smile, even if she was crying. To this day, and she is almost 35, we have never had an argument. Seriously, not one. My love for her is deeper than the word, a thing that is more than the word emotions can express. We share something intangible, and it is amazing. I wish everything could understand, or I wish everyone could understand something so intense. Recently, I was speaking to my sister on the phone, and I started to feel wrong. Not sick or anything, but off, as if I had done something wrong. Something akin, I thought, to guilt. The feeling of awe stayed with me for a few hours until I realized what it was. In a sense, it was guilt, but it was deeper than that, as my sister had started to ask me a question and I cut her off, so I wouldn't forget to ask something. We never got back to her thing. There are so many layers to this that I feel I must walk through them slowly. From in here, we have a different relationship with everyone because everything depends on them making a huge effort and or spending money. Calls only come collect. She is my kid sister, one of the most amazing people on the planet, and the single most important person to me. I have one odd quirk. When I have something in my head, like a question, I can get stupid until I get it out, almost like an OCD. So I was in part ashamed that I had been selfish, frustrated that I had failed to go back to her question, and guilty for having cut her off when she so clearly needed to ask whatever it was. I felt that way until I was able to talk to her about it. She, of course, hadn't even noticed.
Duncan, I was just wanted to comment on how interesting and great that is to hear that as a youth you had something that still stuck with you, this art form, and that drew you a passion. And so I'm curious how, like, if you had advice for someone who didn't have all this programming available to them, what would you want them to know? What would you want them to hear from you?
The first thing is you can make your own.
Mm.
Right? You don't need someone to hand you a program. You can start one on your own. If you want to start a writing class, it can start as a writing group. It can start in the day room if you have to, if your institution isn't super into things like this. Although I've seen from having helped friends start things inside even now, if you start things like this, most institutions are ready to jump on board. They don't have to do anything, and it's a feather in their cap.
Mm.
But whatever you're passionate about or want to try to be passionate about, go make it happen. It's so easy inside to just walk laps every day. And that's such a perfect metaphor for what prison is, right? I mean, every day is the same. Everything is the same. You get a program where you do the same garbage all the time to just make the time go by. It's just like walking laps endlessly. Or you attack it. And I didn't know how to do that kind of stuff when I first got to ART, again, the progressive programming facility. Some older gentlemen really did and really showed me. It was great that I knew how to take care of me, that I knew what I wanted, but I didn't really learn to grow or mature within that until I realized that helping other people do the same thing is better. You win because your community ends up being better anyway, but it's so much more rewarding. So one of the things that I did is I was a softball coach for over 20 years, but the team was put together. One of my friends that joined the team said, I will play if it's about these things, and that we're really trying to find the kids on the yard who have never been taught these things and teach them these life lessons under the auspices of softball. If that's what we're going to do, I'm in. And as soon as he said that, I realized it's exactly what we had to do. And so I'm really proud of a lot of the things that we did on the softball field. And some of them were easy, like we were the first team to mix races, which is something that normally doesn't happen in prison. When I left that yard, there were rules in every league that you had to be mixed race for your teams. You couldn't do one race only. But the biggest thing is the small stories. I had a friend who had massive anger management issues, and we helped him get control of his anger. We had friends that didn't understand hard work or what hard work meant or why you worked hard. We were able to teach those. I had one where I spoke to a kid for 5 minutes about what being on my team was like. We never actually played. COVID killed the league. But I said, it's about hard work. It's about doing it right, fundamentals, team. If you work for me, I'll work for you. The same almost boilerplate crap that any coach says to any kid if he's about anything, seemingly. A month later or so, I found out I got a commutation. Another month later, everybody's kind of segregated by buildings. I'm walking laps and I hear my name called from behind me. This kid that I'd had this conversation for is a 6'5", 20-something-year-old black gang member. He is a big dude and a scary looking dude. And he runs at me with glee on his face to tell me congratulations about the commutation. He's about to cry. He's on a prison yard where you can't do anything he's doing. He's a black guy running up to a white guy. All sorts of rules are being violated here. But you can see I see that this guy needs a hug, right? I spoke to him for 5 minutes about dumb stuff that everybody says about team. It's important stuff if you're really doing it, but still, it's things everybody says. I gave him a hug. He hugged me like he was hugging his mom. Told me how excited he was that I, of all people, got a commutation. I don't get this. I don't understand the absolute zeal. So I go to the guy later. I gave him time. I'm there with him. I go to the guy that had signed this guy to the team, and I said, what's going on there? Is this guy for real? And he says, oh, yeah. He came to me and asked me the same thing after that 5-minute conversation. He told me that no one in his life had ever said words like that to him. No one in his life had ever offered to be there for him as he's there for them. And he wanted to know if I was for real back then. And when the guy said, yeah, that's what Duncan is. That's who he is. That's how he is, right? You work for him, he will kill himself for you. That's what he is. And realizing how this thing that I saw as trite, because I was on a bunch of teams where people said that, and it's what I said, and it is what I did, but I didn't realize the import because I had heard it my whole childhood. That's the kind of stuff that we were able to bring to the yard. That's the kind of stuff that you guys bring to these yards when you come in. And it's not what you do specifically in the moment might be huge for an individual, but the overall, it's the little things often that are so much more important. So what would I tell somebody who hasn't done it before? Do it, but also don't just do it for you, do it for the next man. Because if you find a way to do it for the next man, you're now embracing service. It's a whole community building thing. And all of that just starts to fall in line just because you've got that attitude.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Duncan, this really brings up for me this thing of, trying to wrap my head around it. And we had a conversation with Brantley Choate, who's the director of the education programs at CDCR. And we were asking about doing research, and he brought up the question of, what are the specific critical thinking skills that one gets in doing a BA in communication studies? And so I'm trying to sort of formulate that. And some of what I hear you talk about today wants me to go back to that question and ask you in terms of specific critical thinking skills that came from this work that we did together, but in particular, the narrative therapy, because both Bidan Roy was really interested in narrative therapy and bringing in these principles of narrative and narrative therapy. And then this was something that Elizabeth and I are, very much involved in as well, to doing narradrama work and, working with developing alternative stories to problem saturated stories and, helping redefine identities, and but doing so through a creative process of drama. And I was wondering if there's, if you have some thoughts on that as well too. What specific critical thinking skills does one develop in participating in this kind of narrative performance work with you as someone who's had a great deal of experience in that?
Well, first off, you don't have options as a critical thinker or a critical actor in prison. There are very defined rules. If prison works the way prison is supposed to, it's very simple. If you make me mad, I stab you. And that's the catch, right? You don't make me mad, because if you make me mad, I stab you. I don't make you mad because if I make you mad, you stab me. Those are the options. That's the paradigm. And while it's not that literal all the time, that's where everything falls back to. Logic even goes out the window sometimes, just because this is how it is. Learning, and interestingly, as an aside, you become a really, really good interpersonal communicator, intercultural communicator inside automatically, because there's so many different cultures just rammed together. You don't know it, but you become it. But when you add the option to talk things through with somebody, instead of just having a firm, this is my line, this is your line, let's not cross our lines. If the lines get blurred because you're able to step across them with an olive branch, then the opportunity for growth happens much faster. There's a wonderful research paper by Frank and Gill about negotiated identities and problematic integration that is fascinating, and it breaks prison down basically into 3 stages. You get there, you play the game because you have to play the game to survive. You realize after 5 years or so that you have to play the game, but it's a game. And so you play the game, but now you realize that it's just a game. And then after another 5 years or so, you realize that you don't have to play. You just be yourself. And if people don't like it, who cares? Getting people to that 3rd stage, because that's where real growth happens. I think that it actually falls into kind of Maslow's lower hierarchy of needs, right? When you first get there, you're at the bottom rung trying to survive. All that matters is survival. And you realize you have a little bit of leeway and you're moving up a rung or two. And by the end, you have the opportunity to move up as high as you want, even though you're still in that setting. The things that we were taught, and I can't say a specific tool, but the things that we were taught were options and ways to break down those paradigms and open doors. Like going back a step, knowing, and this didn't come from school, but it's the same type of thing, knowing that I could integrate my team and that I could get away with that. And people would make threats and whatever, but I could get away with that. And what a game changer that was an option. And when we did that, we knew what we were doing. We knew we were really challenging the paradigm. And the thing that the school did, or the classes did, is it gave us different tools, a bevy of different tools to really challenge paradigms. And it's that sort of thing, some is simple. Somebody sees a book, they read a book. Dostoevsky, right? Cool. But other things, if I don't think I can turn left until somebody shows me I can, I don't think I can turn left. I don't think I can start a program. That's not, inmates don't start programs, staff starts programs. Wait, other inmates are starting programs, I can start programs. Those types of subtle changes are huge. And you guys did that. I'll say this too, specifically about the drama side. You're forcing people to step outside of what's comfortable, which does 2 things. 1, it lets you see the other side of the street. and two, it lets you see the other side of yourself. And I think that that is more important in a carceral setting than it is outside, because people get so stuck in the role that they have and the game they have to play.
Yeah, that's very perfect. Just you just hit it on the head for me too. You know, that ability to try on different roles and to come out of that being stuck in this role that has been assigned to us and that we're reinforcing over and over again. That freedom to have a little bit of a change, which reminds me of this course that we had, the health communication class. That's when you and I became a lot closer during that class. I remember in the fall of 2019, we would sit there together during chow time. And I remember you told this story about a horrifying medical encounter that you had, that then the students in the class, they took on that story that you had and they went out in the hallway and created a scene based on that, and they came back, and then we did an alternative version of that story as well too, with a talkback method and how it would have been an ideal way if for the medical professionals to handle that situation. I was wondering if if you have some thoughts about that experience in particular.
Well, there's two sides to that. First, we get treated worse medically inside just because we're inside, and that makes it very easy for people inside to be forced to do things that don't help the medical professional. It's this horrible cycle. If I have to say I'm bleeding out my eyeballs for you to pay attention to me, now you think I'm bleeding out my eyeballs when I'm not, instead of just helping me with my actual problem. But what was really fascinating about that day for me was I really struggled to share how bad what I was going through was. And when we were able to go through it as a class, I think was the first time a lot of the people in the class really got to relate to what I was experiencing. I mean, I would do 2-hour bus rides with no toilet when I had to pee every 5 minutes. And I would get to where I was going, hunched over, pouring sweat, barely able to move. One time my shoulder was, it was in a seizure, and nobody cared. It's just what it was. If I wanted to go see the doctor, that's what I had to go through. And I don't say that as a woe is me, feel bad for me. I say that as that's just how the system is. Nobody gives a crap. So when we learned how to better communicate within that, even within each other or even to each other, having friends see me need to pee a lot. Oh, okay, just pees a lot. I know what the feeling is to have to pee, but it wasn't that. It was that amplified by a lot. And like I say, that was the first class where really I saw my classmates, and several of them spoke to me about it afterwards, really start to get it. And it was funny as a story in class. It made everybody laugh. It didn't come across funny on paper when I wrote it, but also once we did it, it really changed kind of the paradigm of the whole thing too. And that was one of the rougher days. I mean, just the lack of care and the amount of pain, and but yeah, it really changed how people saw what I was going through.
And I can tell you that it also changed how several people came up to me in the following weeks about how that had influenced their interactions when they would go for medical attention, that they learned new skills on how to make sure that they're being heard and how to demand what they needed a little bit more openly. And that was, a great deal of it was because of that experience in the class. And then
and
seeing that there's alternatives, there's possibilities as well.
And you're taught, especially if you go through LA County Jail, that you can't raise your hand. Nobody cares, but you can't say no. And I remember being in a holding tank once, and I was bent over all the way, rocking back and forth against pain that I could barely stand, waiting for the doctor to see me. And somebody said, "Why don't you say something?" And why don't I? Right? Because the lesson we're taught coming in is you can't. And so finally I started to make noise, and next thing I know, I'm getting attention faster. But you get into that trap of thinking you can't even say something. You can't even really complain. And part of that is the system insists you have to do crazy things sometimes to really complain because they don't want to have to deal with you. But that's a different thing. But no, the beauty of that class, and you just hit it on the head, is it was a sharing of information. And I think both ways. I think outside of inside, people don't think about how bad stuff like that can be. We had a woman visiting go into a diabetic seizure / coma. This is a visitor, somebody who'd come in. So they call 911, they rush her out front. 40 minutes later, the ambulance comes driving slowly up to the front gate. It comes up, it stops. The two paramedics get out. They're laughing and joking, walking towards this woman on a gurney. And they look down, they realize, and the officer that was there, who I spoke to about this personally, said, "What is wrong with you guys?" They look down, they go, "Oh crap, we thought it was an inmate." Right? So it's perfectly fine for us to take lollygag for 40 minutes to get here because it was just an inmate. And that type of mentality from medical professionals, sure, paramedic, EMT, whatever they were, is maybe the bottom end, but still, this is a pervasive attitude and problem. The story that we recounted, that we did the thing in class, I was a piece of meat on a table. Nobody cared. Do this, do that, do whatever. It was check the boxes and get me out of there. That's a difficult thing to come to grips with. And when we think we can't complain, because again, that's what you're taught early, it puts you in a really horrible position. So learning that we could complain, learning better ways to complain or to talk was really helpful.
And then also just sharing that story and having your colleagues in the classroom work with you and sort of honor you and honor that story. I think that was really also very helpful too.
This piece was written by Duncan Martinez. Get off my neck! What right do you have to dominate me? Why do I need to listen to you? Because you wear a badge? What does that even mean? You went to school for a couple of months and carry a gun? You protect and serve? Then get your knee off my neck! Don't you get it? I ain't done nothing wrong. Get your knee off my neck, please! I just want to live here to be the best I can be. I don't care about your hatred, your problems. They're not mine. Don't you get it? Just because you wear a gun like some kind of gunslinger? What gives you the right to act like this? Why is it me that has to suffer? The irony is that you're the same as me, just another body under the knee of the people that pay you, the 1%ers at the top. They control this shit and you enforce it. And you don't even know it. I voted. I voted for all the right people and it still ain't changed nothing. Not a damn thing. People are still dying because some ignorant idiot gets to be a bully. It's not just you cops either, it's everything. If I ain't in, I'm out. Get it? There's some good cops out there too. So much of society is. But the knee that keeps us down, it keeps all of us down. At least a little. The knee, it's on all our necks. We just get used to it, don't we? We go on and on, just losing and stop caring. So easy, the fire just goes out. The knee gets heavier and eats into you, becomes a part of who you are. Day in, day out, that fucking knee. You feel a little less every day until you don't even notice, right? Please, your knee. I can't breathe.
I want to ask you one more question related
Sure.
to performance, because several months later, during the pandemic, you also wrote that very powerful piece that was entitled "I Can't Breathe." It was in response to the killing of George Floyd, and we had a colleague that adapted that into a performance, and then you were able to watch that performance. I think you were able to watch it, right, on the television circuit, the closed circuit.
I was
TV.
never able to see it inside, but I have seen it since.
Oh, you have seen it.
And she did a great job. She was really good.
I think
You know, it's
talk
funny.
about that experience a little bit too. Yeah.
You know, that was a really hard time inside because we all felt that so strongly. Didn't matter what you did. 20 years in, 10, 20 years in, you just feel the weight of the system on you. And I wrote that really passionately. I was really hot. The whole place was. The whole place was abuzz with the energy of that's what we're living through. You guys are seeing it now. It's not this crazy thing, which is one of the hardest communication issues with people about inside. When you share, even with family, it's, oh, well, you know, you shouldn't have done the crime if you didn't want to do the time, kind of an attitude, even with people that are on your side, because it's such an inherent bias. You shouldn't have crossed over to criminal. You crossed over to criminal, so anything goes. We hear about bad treatment, and it's, whoa, that must have been isolated. It's everywhere. The Stanford experiment where they, had the students be mean to other students, or ultimately, that's what it's like. And it shouldn't be. We should be better. We should be holding ourselves to a better standard. And like I say, most people don't even know they can complain. Not really. And it's those opportunities I mentioned before, the having extra doors open so you have an idea of being able to do something different.
I am curious about this aspect of writing and sharing your emotional life, emotional world, like you said, even the part of I Can't Breathe, like the idea of when did you, or was there a particular time when you started to feel like there was a safety to do so? Because I know that's often an element, is not feeling safe to share your emotional life.
Well, and let's start with most writers write about themselves as they write about everything else, right? And it's a safe way, inside, outside, doesn't matter. It's a safe way to work through whatever you're working through as a writer without it directly being personal. That's just a thing that writers do. I wrote a play called Volleyball with Reese, and through Arts and Corrections, and I believe his name was Luis Martinez, a UCI professor, came in and directed it, and we did it like a real production. But when I was approached about writing that was the first time I wrote something where, well, it didn't have my name on a character. It was pretty clearly me that I was writing about. It was pretty openly me that I was writing about. And a fascinating experience, top to bottom. I got to be the writer in the room with the director as we went through the whole process. But also really freeing. And the actors that were playing the parts would come to me and say, okay, when you, talking about their character, were feeling this, what was going through your head? And it became this dialogue that was really, really cool. Sadly, the play has been lost to time. There were videos of it too. All of that's gone. But it was an amazing experience. But that was the place where I finally just embraced it. And after that, I wrote about everything. It didn't matter. I didn't care. And that's a liberating point. It's a good question, by the way. It really is something that's hard for people to express. And there's two sides of that. One, it's inherently hard for people to express. I think everybody has a natural fear of really opening that door. The other is, if you have a piece published as someone inside, that means everybody inside can read it. And that's opening a door to your inner demons that might give, that guy a wedge to use against you.
Mm.
And to some guys, especially the guys that were in prison in the 80s, you don't do that. You don't open that door. I'm working with a guy, Robert Pratt, Kamran, who just wrote a great piece that we're going to try and put out soon. And he didn't hold anything back. And it's really, really cool, and it's really good. But it took him a long time to get there, and he's become a phenomenal writer. Um, in fact, I think he's the hardest worker both cohorts. I don't know anything about the third cohort, but he started off, he could barely write at all, and he's one of the best writers in the program now. But watching guys really struggle to 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 be open that way, because of those worries. And that's the lesson you're taught. You don't show any weakness. You don't show anybody anything. If you care about something, they can use it against you. This guy lost his sister for 30 years and they reconnected because he graduated. And they didn't really realize how much they had lost over that 30 years. It just kind of happened. And when they reconnected, it was this magical reconnection, which is wonderful and horrible at the same time. Her pain because she can't get him out is so intense. His pain because he can't just go fix his sister's problems is so intense. And their love is so intense. She wrote a piece too that's really good. But the fact that he was willing to be so open is really a testament to how far this program has helped people go. When he first got to the yard, he barely talked to people. And he would certainly not tell you he cared about something. And now he's writing a piece about how much his sister means to him, and writing a piece about how devastating all of the bad things that happened to him in his life were, and all of his failings, and how he let the world down by doing all of these things wrong. It's not something he would have done.
Great sense of humor. He wrote a piece called Pseudo Listening, which was hilariously funny, and we had that performed a couple of times in class. So what it's like to in the chapter on interpersonal communication about listening skills. There was a part about also understanding what it means to be pseudo listening, and he did a great job of that as well. So he's a really wonderful writer.
Absolutely, and again, he could barely write when he started, and has, oh my God, he worked so hard. He was my cellie for a long time, and that's all he did. He would get up, read, go to work, come home, read, go to bed, and it was all school stuff. And if he had to write or type or whatever, but it was get up, work, go to work, come home, work, go to bed, and he did that for years. It's really fascinating. But here's the other side of that. He's been in prison 35 years now. The first 30 years or so that he was in prison, what did he do? He watched bad TV and goofed off and was an idiot because he didn't have opportunity. When the college program came and he could be a college student, and I remember having a conversation with him in a day room. This is before we were cellies. He was in Coastline and struggling with Coastline Community College. The idea of joining the bachelor's program was too much. He couldn't do it. And I and several others really pushed for him to go. And when he believed that he could maybe do it, and started really working hard, it took a long time for him to start to actually believe in himself, because he had for so long been taught not to and not to care. And he's being asked to do the opposite. He's teaching a writing class now inside. He's leading a group inside about putting writings together for people outside. This from a guy who, again, would say hello and he would move on to almost everybody because that's what's safe on a yard. And for something like 30 years inside, that's what he was taught. You don't ever care, and you don't let anyone know you care. And that's really sad because he's such a nice guy. He's such a kind heart. And to think that he stepped on that for so long, you know? So anyway.
Yeah. So much of it also has to do with the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and learning how to rewrite those stories. And I think definitely with Robert Pratt, it's a great example of it. I just heard also the other day, I don't know if you know about this, but Larry Torres came up to me and he said, I just wanted to let you know that, I met my son after 20 years. He came over for Father's Day, and this was a magical moment. We had 2.5 hours together. We laughed and we cried and we connected. And I'm so glad. And he said it was partly because there was a performance that we did in 2018 where Elizabeth asked Larry to explore a little bit more about his role as a father and the fact that he hadn't seen his son all these years. And that performance was videotaped, and his sister had a link to that performance, and then she sent that to his ex-wife. She took about another 1.5 years to share that, I guess, with the child, and the child said, "No, I want to go meet my dad." So they just had this amazing encounter after all these years as a result of some of that work. Of course, yeah.
On that note, let me say one more thing. Thank you guys for the work you do. A lot of people won't know how to say those words and articulate those words, especially early. A lot of people that you guys will never talk to are growing because of the work you guys do. And you will never see it directly because they'll never talk to you. That's not to say that they don't mean the things. They just don't necessarily know how to express it, or in cases, because again, they'll never talk to you, the opportunity to say it. But when you guys go in, we used to say, Kamran, that you were a jerk. You were so nice. You were such a wonderful beacon that you would say, 1 page, 5 page, whatever. If you guys want to write 5, go ahead. But yeah, you only have to do 1. Everybody's writing 5, right? Because you said it, right? And the joke was, and again, joke is that you were a jerk because you were so nice. But when you present that attitude, when you carry yourself that lovingly, which you just naturally do, that changes hearts and minds. And it changes hearts and minds in a huge way, even though you don't necessarily see it. You too, Elizabeth, I've watched it happen. I guarantee all 3 of you this is true, but I also bet that you guys don't hear the words I'm saying now enough. So please, please know that there's a lot of thanks that you don't hear, and that there's a lot of effect that you never see. So in those moments when it's hard, and I know it can be hard from every side of this, please just remember those things. You guys changed my life in a huge way, and I thought I was in a pretty good place. Well, I went to a better one. I watched what happened with Robert and Larry and Justin and a whole bunch of guys. I watched them change from being people trying to do better to better people helping other people do better. And that's the opportunities created by programs like this. And again, you guys won't hear a lot of that, but please know that that's there.
Thank you so much. No, I mean, I think that, observing, seeing this transformation that takes place, it's been huge for me too on a personal level, just being able to, having the honor of being able to see how people are transformed in this process, how new relationships are created, how new forms of safety and intimacy and communication develop, self-growth and development. I couldn't ask for more. Thank you. And also to talk a little bit about your goals and plans. I know you're going into this MFA program, and you think you could maybe carry forward some of this work in your own writing and artistic work in the future.
Well, one of the things that I said in the interview was that there's a lot of stories that aren't being told that need to be told. And we've talked about those types of stories today, and that's absolutely true. I don't know what my goal is long term. I really don't. I know that I love film, and I know that I love narrative in a way that makes me geek out on narrative. I had a conversation with somebody about a TV show last night where they had watched it a while ago and thought it was just mind blowing. And I'm like, yeah, but you knew all of those things were going to happen. It had to. It couldn't have gone any other way. And when I broke it down, they're like, oh, well, that sucks. But I love that, right? So it's in that direction somewhere. One of the things that excites me about this program in particular is apparently they're really good at finding where you should be and helping you get to that place. And it seems like just an amazing group. The professors are all really, really community oriented within the group. So I don't know. I keep saying I'm looking for the job I can't say no to, but I don't know what that job is yet. And but I know I want to be pushing things forward. And like I say, there's a lot of stories that we tell prison stories really badly. Walking the track, like we said, is a great metaphor for prison. That's not the story we tell. You don't get the idea that just years just go by and there's nothing. And that's what makes prison hard. It's not oh my God, there's a riot. That's hard for the 5 minutes that the riot's there. And then your world gets shaken up for a little bit. But a month later, you're back to walking the track again. And that really is indicative of the problem. Most places, because there's not programs. No, I'll find what it is. I don't have a firm, I want this job, but I know it's something in that direction.
Great. Well, good luck to you, and I'm really looking forward to see you work with you this next couple of years on campus as well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed hearing what you had to say, and some of the questions I had in mind you answered, so I was just listening. Particularly, one thing that I was thinking of is the different roles that you witnessed people expand into, and then for yourself. But you answered a lot of that. Just the idea that, people had the role of student. You talked about Robert, who I really enjoyed working with, and it's great to hear more of who he is. Expanding into the role of student in a way that he couldn't see for himself, but given that opportunity. And just the way, because a lot of drama therapy, we talk about roles and role expansion, meaning sometimes it's roles, like you said, even some family and friends say, well, you're a criminal now, and that's kind of what you get. And yet, their view has to expand too. So it's not just the person inside whose view of themselves is expanding and opening up to lead a more fulfilling life inside or out, but also those on the outside. Just even this interview, we're hoping that we expand people's views of the roles that we're all able to, take on, no matter where we've been, what we've done, what we've gone through. And so I think you touched on that really nicely.
Well, I think we really need to re-signify what we mean by criminal as a society, because the inherent bias there is so strong. And we all know, although we don't when we're 20 inside, that being given a role makes you, not only behave as the expectation of the role, but then you're treated as the role too, which just reinforces all of that. So if you're told, hey, you're a bad guy, not you made a mistake, let's make you a community person again. You're a bad guy. What do? You go be a bad guy. And if you're in an environment where you don't have any other options, you go be a bad guy. So we really need to change how we perceive that as a society, or nothing's going to change.